You are about to enjoy a production of the Ella Wellness Network. This is Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsey Vick, and we are about to get hotter and smarter in 5. Let's get into it. Today, we're going to be diving into the question, how do I know if I'm working out hard enough, especially when it comes to cardio? So let's get hotter and smarter in 5 as we dive in. So a little disclaimer before we start. When we're talking about cardio, I'm thinking of the purpose of your training being to improve your cardiorespiratory fitness, the ability for your body to pump enough blood, pump enough, nutrients to the body in order to power your exercise, in order to power our life, right? And so I don't want this sciencey episode to dissuade you from doing whatever you can. Like a walk is still great. Cardio in any form is still great. But if your goals are for performance now and then longevity in the future, so building your heart muscle up now in order to positively affect your life in your 70s, 80s, 90s, then this is definitely the episode for you. And if you like to track sorts of things and have objective measurements to keep in mind when you're training, again, this is the episode for you. I love knowing certain variables and seeing improvement over time in certain variables. So today we will cover just different heart rate ranges to stay in and push yourself to when it comes to improving your cardiorespiratory fitness. And then also how to know when you're improving, what we can look for in objective measures like heart rate and the amount of effort that we're putting in rate of perceived exertion, all of these things in order to make sure that we are training at a sufficient intensity to positively affect our heart muscle and our physiology. So I don't want this to overwhelm you, especially if you are someone who is just like starting in your exercise journey. This episode is primarily for those of us who like to have these objective measures, like to know how hard to push ourselves, and like to just, have a goal really for our overall cardiorespiratory fitness. So for me, if I'm going on a hill sprint run workout or a long run workout, I want to know that I am pushing my heart rate enough that I am going to achieve the physiological benefits from that workout. And again, there's mental benefits from cardio workouts. There's so many other benefits that are not just like building up that heart muscle and your cardiovascular system. So I don't want to dissuade anyone from doing any form of cardio. But if my goal, like my long runs, my hill sprints, are pushing that heart muscle, like my goal is to improve that heart muscle. And so if you approach those workouts like this and your goals are similar to mine with the purpose you put behind your cardio workouts, then this episode will help you decide how hard you need to push yourself in order to achieve those physiological benefits. So for me, incorporating cardio is a way to get those physiological benefits like improving my cardiovascular endurance, fighting against different like plaque buildups and different cardiovascular diseases, improving my overall like mitochondrial function and the ability for my body to disperse and utilize oxygen throughout my body, brain health, improving my cardiac output. Like there's so many variables that I want to improve when I go on some of my like purposeful cardio workouts. But it's okay. Sometimes I do just want to go on a swim or a bike or a run without any metrics, and that is totally okay too. So it just depends on the purpose behind the workout. So how much is even enough and how do I measure it? There's an easy way and then there's a more objective way. So we have what we call the talk test. And what the talk test is if you're able to do a workout and talk to your neighbor beside you or your accountability partner or your running partner or whoever, we consider that moderate intensity. If you're working out in an effort that you can't carry on a conversation with that person, that's considered vigorous exercise. And I've heard it go a step further that with moderate exercise, you can talk but not sing, right? You're pushing yourself so much that you're talking and able to maintain that steady conversation, but you're not able to sing, right? And then that vigorous exercise, it is hard to carry on a conversation. So that's what we call the talk test. And that's a way to see, okay, am I working out at a moderate intensity or more of a vigorous intensity? And both are good for a variety of reasons. Like it's not that one's better than the other. For the more objective way to measure it, we go based on our heart rate. And if you're on any sort of heart rate medication, this one's not necessarily a good metric for you to utilize. But in general, this is like how we measure vigorous versus moderate intensity exercise when it comes to heart rate. So moderate intensity is in that 65 to 75% of your heart rate max, and vigorous intensity is from that like 76 to 96% range of your heart rate max. And you might be asking, how do I calculate my heart rate max? What is my heart rate max? So your heart rate max is basically the max heart rate that you can possibly get to, right? And so if your heart rate is pumping at its max capabilities, then we want to work out at 65 to 75% of that max for moderate intensity. And then we want to work out at 76 to 96% for vigorous activity. So in order to calculate, you need to know your heart rate max. And your max heart rate can be calculated really quickly and again have an estimate of 220 minus your age. So for me, 220 minus 30, my estimated max heart rate is 190. In order to measure your heart rate during your workout, you can use a fitness tracker, but I will say my Aura Ring doesn't quite measure it in the moment as quickly as I can. And so I like to physically measure it. And the way that I do it is that I set my timer or on my like fitness tracker, whatever it is, I count my beats that I'm feeling under my hand at my heart for 15 seconds and I multiply that number times 4. And I do that most often at the most vigorous part of my workout. So I want to see what my heart rate reached, like the level that it reached. But you can do this throughout your workout. So the longer you measure your heart rate physically, the more accurate it's going to be. But I'm not going to be able to measure my heart rate for 60 seconds like throughout my workout the whole time. So I just take 15 and I multiply it by 4. And that is my current heart rate that I am going to use to see what percentage I'm working out at when compared to my max heart rate. So after you have those two numbers, you divide your measured heart rate by your estimated max heart rate. And that will tell you the percentage that you were working out at, whether that's moderate or vigorous. And again, that number is in the moment, so it gives you a nice snapshot of how hard that workout was for you, more so than what you can possibly tell, right? Like it puts an objective measurement to the amount of effort that you're putting in. I will say the other day I reached like a heart rate of 192. So obviously that like 220 minus an age is just an estimate. If you really want to get your true heart rate max, you'll have to go through like a VO2 max testing, which is a very, very challenging test. It's where you either ride the bike or on a treadmill and they increase the interval and speed in like subsequent intervals until you basically can't go anymore. And they're measuring different variables throughout that process. And that will be the most accurate way to get your true max heart rate. But if you don't want to do that test, 220 minus your age will give you a nice estimate. So how do you know if you're improving? And this is one of my favorite variables to keep track of. There's one way where, okay, if I reached 192 beats per minute doing this workout, if I do this same workout next week and the week after and the week after, and my heart rate goes down or I don't reach that max heart rate, that's a good thing because your heart rate's getting more efficient at pumping that blood to the muscles that need it and giving that oxygen to the muscles that need it. And so seeing that heart rate decline over time for the same workout that you're doing at the same point in the workout, and for women at the same point in your menstrual cycle, which is important, but we'll get to that in a little bit. That's a way to track improvement. My favorite way to track improvement is based on heart rate recovery. And so it is the ability for our bodies to go from this heightened sympathetic fight or flight state that we expect during exercise and go calm it back down to that parasympathetic rest, digest, muscle recovery stage. So if you do the same cardio workout each week, it's nice to track this over time. So there's a few ways to measure. You can count your heart rate at the end of the workout, see what it's at, and then measure that for a minute. Measure it after a minute and see what the difference between those two numbers are. As that distance gets larger and larger over time, meaning you're going from, let's say 200 beats per minute to maybe 150 after a minute, then you're going to 130. That's an indicative that you're recovering better for that same workout over time. The other way I like to measure it is, okay, let's say I reached, 175 in this workout and I want to get back down to 65 beats per minute. I measure the time it takes for me to do that. And the quicker the time it takes, the better my body is able to kick into that recovery mode. So this is just a fun thing to keep track of. Again, you can do it throughout your workout, but it's very important for us as women to measure the same workouts, right? We don't want to be comparing a strength workout to a swim workout or a hill sprint workout to a long run workout. Like we want to keep it very consistent. So measuring it workout to workout, and then also making a point to note what phase of our menstrual cycle we're in, because during that luteal phase, during that second part of our cycle, it's a lot harder for our bodies to recover. So if we're comparing a follicular phase hill sprint workout to a luteal phase hill sprint workout, and we're like, gosh, why am I actually regressing? It's not that you're regressing, it's just that our bodies are naturally primed for recovery, primed for that like ability to calm back down in that follicular phase compared to that luteal phase. So measuring the same workout follicular phase to follicular phase and then luteal phase to luteal phase is a way to sort of mitigate that bias within the menstrual cycle. So I know that's a lot, but if you're like me and like to have those objective measures and like to see how hard you're pushing yourself, or if you're like, okay, I'm pushing myself too hard for this moderate intensity workout, whatever that might be, whatever your reason for tracking might be, I hope this episode was helpful and gives you guys a few sort of objective ways in order to say and answer the question like, how hard am I working out? How hard am I pushing myself? So this was the cardio episode. Next week in Hotter and Smarter in 5, we'll go over how hard to push yourself when it comes to strength training for those physiological benefits. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and now we're a little hotter and smarter in 5. Now that we know how hard to push ourselves during our cardiovascular based workouts.